Hello, welcome to The Loney Show. I'm your host, John Loney. And in this episode, I have brought on regular Faiffy. And as for our guest, returning from the very first season, he's from Phoenix, Arizona. He has graduated from the University School of Engineering at age 17, graduated Bachelor's of Science cum laude from City University of New York at age 22, and has devoted his life to over 50,000 hours to the study and practice of multiple dimensions and human potential and development. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Jim Marshall.
Hi, Peter.
Hello. So, in the last episode, you were going to show us more about Septemics through your book.
Right.
Would you like to start off?
Okay. So, here's the cover of the book. And as you can see, there is a logo.
Okay, cool.
The logo tells you something about the subject. It has 7 rays. So Septemics consists of 35 scales, each of which has 7 levels. Septemics means literally of or pertaining to 7. So the logo has 7 rays, each of which is pointing in a different direction, and each of which is a different color. Now you see they make a spectrum.
Okay, cool.
So that it sort of tells you what this subject is. And there are 35 different axes of human behavior or human phenomena, each of which is different from the other 34. Each one is unique, but they all have this same quality of 7 rays and a spectrum of human behavior or human function. I don't use human behavior because that's the definition of psychology, and this subject is much bigger than psychology. If you actually read the book and look at the scales, you'll see what I mean. Many of the things covered are not covered at all in psychology. So I'm going to go to the first scale. All right?
Yeah, cool.
Okay. So I trust you're seeing this right reading because on my screen everything is back perfect.
I can see it. I can see it all perfectly.
Okay, so there is chapter 1, the scale of basic purposes. Now, as you can see, there are 7 levels: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The lowest one is subversive, which is the lowest basic purpose that a human can have. That person's objective is to destroy. Most people cannot understand this. It makes no sense to normal people because it's crazy. People at this level were Hitler and Pol Pot. And if you study what they actually did, forget their rhetoric and just look at what they did, you can see they were destructive. Now, just because somebody occasionally does destructive things doesn't make him a subversive. Everybody occasionally does something destructive. In fact, sometimes doing something destructive is a good thing. Like, for example, killing a mosquito in your house rather than getting bitten. So the point is that this is their basic purpose. Now, everybody has many purposes, but when you know the basic purpose of a person, you really can understand that person. And I think I mentioned last time we spoke that I can tell you the basic purpose of all the presidents of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's because I had plenty of opportunity to observe them, see how they acted, see what they said, see what they wrote, and so forth. And to me, knowing this material, it's not hard to figure this out. Anybody who studies this book will have a similar ability eventually. Now, up from subversive is level 6, which is the criminal. The criminal is easy for most people to understand. The criminal is only out for himself. His goal is pleasure, which is why you see in criminals like Al Capone or any mafia leader, any real criminal, they're interested in drugs and alcohol and women and limousines and suits and yachts and things like that. That's all they're interested in, is pleasure. And they will do anything to get that. Now, of course, different things are pleasurable to different people. Not everybody has the same taste. Some people are not interested in alcohol. They're interested in something else. But generally speaking, when you see somebody who's all about pleasure, it comes out in their rhetoric. You can hear it when they speak. And these people, they're about 20% of the population, and they will do anything that they can get away with. They're not destructive per se, but they are destructive to anybody who gets in their way and tries to prevent them from accomplishing whatever they want to accomplish. Pleasure might mean fame. It might mean notoriety. It might mean power. All of those things can be pleasurable. And so that's what motivates the criminal and nothing else. They're not interested in getting better. They're not interested in helping people around them. They're not interested in improving the world. They're interested in doing whatever pleases them. Up from that is the last of these levels that I discovered, which led me to this discovery of Septemics. And that is the loser. Now, a loser is not just somebody who's doing badly. Everybody does badly sometimes. The loser is a person whose objective is to suffer. These people sabotage themselves. So no matter what you try to do for them, it's not going to work out. They will become drug addicts, alcoholics, end up in jail, bankruptcy court, insane asylums. A lot of them don't live very long. And these people are frustrating to people who, what you might call do-gooders, because you can't help them. They are not really destructive except to themselves. Now, to the extent that you become associated with them, they wind up being destructive to you inadvertently. So this is the type of person who will get into a terrible relationship and stay there because their goal is to lose. This makes no sense to most people, and this is why it is the last of these 7 levels for me to discover. Now, up from that is level 4, which is the normal. The normal is pretty much what it sounds like. These are normal people. This is about 30% of the population, fortunately. They want to have a house, a job, be out of debt, raise their children, take a vacation. They're not particularly interested in improving themselves or anybody else. They're not interested in saving the world. They're just normal people who want to fit in. Their objective really is conformity, although they might not think of it that way. But in reality, if you really look at what they do, that is how they think. These are people who keep up with the Joneses. You know, everybody else has an iPhone, so they want to have an iPhone. Before people had iPhones, they didn't think about it. So they really just want to fit in. If you want to see normals, watch the TV show The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which ran for 15 years, because it was all about normals, and so 30% of the population identified with it, which is more than enough to have a successful TV show. So above that, level 3 is the winner. Now, the winner is not satisfied with fitting in. The winner wants to bring success to himself. His goal is to win. Many of these people are prominent in society. They are driven to make a lot of money, to become famous. Whatever winning means to them, winning doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. But these people, for example, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were winners. They were very successful people. They did not have the same dynamic as what I call leaders, in that, like, for example, Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill did remarkable things which really placed them in danger. The winner is careful to look after himself. When the British were coming to Thomas Jefferson's home, he fled. he wasn't going to get taken by them because he's a winner. And if you look at his life and all the things he did, he won and he won and he won. He did many things very well. Above that is level 2, which is the leader. As I mentioned, Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill were leaders, also Alexander the Great. These people are bent on conquest. Now, don't get a negative association with conquest. I had difficulty getting the right word to describe this. I could have said they're bent on leading, but that's not really the right word. Conquest can be good or bad. When a leader conquers, it's a good thing. For example, Lincoln was determined to conquer the Confederacy. He had almost no help. His generals wouldn't fight for him. His political associates were not behind him. He did it almost by himself. And he accomplished what was considered by most impossible, which is that he preserved the Union and ended slavery. And he pushed through the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery forever. And shortly after that, he got shot in the back of the head by somebody who thought he was a tyrant. So that's fairly typical for leaders. Alexander Hamilton was a leader, and he was shot at age 51 by Aaron Burr, one of the most evil people of his day. So up from that is the saint. Now, saint is someone like Jesus of Nazareth, or Gautama Siddhartha, the founder of Buddhism, Mother Teresa. These are essentially holy people, and their goal is transcendence. They are not interested in the world that most people are. They're not interested in money, they're not interested in fame. Most of these people are anonymous because most of the things that would make them known to the public, they don't care about. They want to ascend. Now, if they're Christians, they'll say they want to go to heaven. If they're Buddhists, they'll say they want to attain nirvana. So the way they express it varies. But regardless of whatever religious persuasion they have, they are saints. And you can see it in their behaviors. So that is the 7 levels of the scale. Now, notice on the opposite side, it says at the top, superhuman, and below that, human, and below that, subhuman. So the top 2 levels are superhumans. They have superhuman abilities. And the bottom 2 levels are subhumans. They are destructive, evil people, and they are appropriately called subhumans. The 3 groups in the middle are humans. They are people that we think of as fairly normal people. Now, also, notice that, just a second. Yes, if you notice next to where it says saint, criminal, saint, leader, and so forth, there's a plus or minus. Now, what that means is 7 of these scales have a positive minus configuration to them, meaning at the highest level, the person is withdrawing. It's an inflow. He's withdrawing from the universe. He's not outflowing into it. Whereas the leader is very definitely outflowing into his environment. So it's a plus. Below that is the winner. The winner is inflowing into himself, inflowing money and notoriety, whatever else he wants. And the normal is outflowing, but in a very conventional way. Below that, you see the loser is inflowing. He's inflowing destruction onto himself. Below that is the criminal, and the criminal is outflowing. Many criminals outflow things like bullets to people. And the subversive is inflowing. He's pulling destruction onto himself. You know, if Hitler were not psychopathic, he could have won World War II. He did preposterous things which brought about destruction. He had a non-aggression pact with the Russians And yet he attacked them. And they were the ones who really did him in. They lost 20 million people in the process. But it really was the Russian army that took down the Nazis. And that was something that most people would not have done. They would have said, well, I'm in a war. I'm trying to defeat the English, because by then the English were the only people left standing. And they never would have done that. And he did many things like that, many things that were destructive to himself and his cause and his country. So that is the scale of basic purposes. If you find your level on this scale, it will help you tremendously, because you will know your basic purpose, and everything else you do will then make sense. It's even more helpful when you find it in other people. So let's say you spot somebody and you figure out this person is at level 6. Just get away from that person. Now, as you can see from what I just described, what's on this page, people at levels 5, 6, and 7 are not an asset to anyone, except potentially an ally that they might have. But they're not loyal to their allies. Hitler, he killed anybody who bothered him, he had killed. Same thing with the mafia. You know, the mayor of Las Vegas used to be, before he was the mayor, used to be the lawyer for the mafia in Las Vegas. Las Vegas that we know was really started by the mafia. And his mother famously said, Oscar's clients don't bother anybody. They only kill one another, which I think is hilarious. But the point is that you can't rely on their loyalty. Even if you're an ally, if you get in their way, they will have you killed or whatever, or something like that. And that is a well-known manifestation of these people. So, any questions?
Faiffy, any questions?
Well,
Nope.
I actually got quite a few questions. You know, where would you rank yourself on the scale?
First of all,
Like,
as I have told everyone I speak to, I have a firm policy of never telling the level on any scale of any living person. It's not ethical, it's not fair, and I don't do it. So I give many examples. I already gave some examples of deceased persons. Okay? So that I will do. But I'm not going to do it for living persons. It's really not fair. It would be like if I had a boxing match with a 10-year-old kid. I have this advantage because I have all this information, and I use these scales continuously without even thinking about it. So I'm not going. The other thing is, it's much more beneficial to the person for him to do it himself. The whole point of this book, which is explained in great detail in the book, is to find the level yourself, but also help the people around you. Help your spouse or your employees or your friend or whatever to find his level. Now, he has to figure it out himself. Don't tell him. That does not help a person.
that's understandable.
Yeah. So I'd like to move on, because this is only one scale, and there are 35 scales. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
And I want to, because this is something that people do not understand about this book.
Okay. So, you were about.
I didn't touch anything.
Oh, that's
So
weird.
Can we go on?
Yeah, sure. Continue.
Okay. So I was just about to show you the scale of personal influence, and okay. So can you see that? Okay.
Yes, I can see it perfectly.
Yes,
Okay. So these are the basic ways in which a person or group influences another person or group. Now, we're talking about influence. We're not talking about, there are other things you can do other than influence. In other words, if you hit somebody over the head with a hammer, you're affecting them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about personal influence. So there are 7 levels of personal influence, and you can see people operating on these various levels. The lowest one is martyrdom, which is influencing people through humility. That is victimization. We are influencing people through guilt. That is domination. Influencing people through overwhelm. Up from that is aloofness, which is influencing people through restraint. And up from that is reason, influencing people by logic. And up from that is charisma, influencing people through leadership. And up from that is telepathy, which is influencing people through will. So notice that. Okay. So how much of that did you get? Did you get the 7 levels that I articulated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a scale of personal influence. Now notice on the other side of the page it says cause at the top and effect at the bottom. So the higher you are on the scale, the more you are at cause, and the lower you are on the scale, the more you are at effect. So the most causative you can be is to control people by will. You just will it, and they're influenced by your will. In other words, it's telepathic. You just think something, and they get it. You see this sometimes in very good relationships. Below that is charisma, which is leadership, influencing people by leadership. Now, that's not quite as good as influencing them by will. You have to actually do something. But charisma is a little bit more intrinsic than a doingness. And then it goes down to reason, which is logic. People understand that very well. Influencing people by logic. Generally, people who are in debates or rhetoric are using this. And then aloofness. People sometimes controlled by aloofness. They restrain themselves. Many women do this. You know, they remain aloof. And it's sort of, by restraining themselves, it's a way of controlling the guy. And then it gets down to domination, where you're overwhelming the person by dominating them. You have to realize that you're getting closer and closer to being at effect. Now, also notice this has the inflow-outflow, where telepathy is an outflow. When you use your will or your telepathy, that's an outflow. But charisma is an inflow. It's like a type of magnetism when you draw people in. Below that is logic, which is an outflow. You are outflowing logic to them, to influence them. Below that is aloofness. I think you can see very well that being aloof is an inflow. You're restraining yourself. You're not outflow. And below that is domination, overwhelm. That is definitely an outflow. And below that is victimization, guilt, where you are, that's an inflow. You're saying, oh, poor me, terrible things are happening to me, and controlling people by guilt. And at the bottom is martyrdom, where you control people by humility, which is an outflow. Now, it may be hard to understand how that is an outflow, but realize it's the lowest type of personal influence. It's the person who does that is the lowest in effect. In other words, I'm going to influence you by killing myself, which is as low down as you can get, or far down the scale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Any questions about this?
How does one consider high influence on someone's behavior?
Are you asking how you perceive it?
Yes.
Or how you think about it?
Okay, how do you perceive the kind of behavioral influence on someone?
Okay, well, let's say you have a husband who's a bully. You know, he yells at his wife, he threatens her, maybe he slaps her around. He's influencing her by domination. Okay? That's pretty easy to see. And as I said, aloofness, there are people who are demure and withholding themselves, many sort of elitist types restrain themselves from others, and that's how they influence them. Obviously, when a person is using logic on you, you can see they're using reason to influence you. If I get up and give a political speech, I'm using logic and trying to convince people of the logic of my ideas, using reason. So any one of these things can be perceived. For example, martyrdom. All of the martyrs, for example, Jesus of Nazareth, he made a huge effect on society. 2,000 years later, 1 billion people are still following him by being a martyr. That's how he influenced people. And I don't know if you remember, but when the soldiers came to take him away, and his right-hand man, Peter, tried to defend him, Jesus stopped him. He said, you're sabotaging me. Get away. Don't do this. He knew that he was going to influence the world through martyrdom. And he did. So those are just some examples. If you study the book and read the examples I give in the chapter, this is not hard to do. You just have to observe people.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Shall I move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as you can see, those two scales are very different from one another. Now we're coming up to the scale of choice. This is really important. Everybody talks about freedom. Everybody wants freedom. What is freedom? Freedom is power of choice. To the degree that you can choose, you are free. To the degree that you cannot choose, you are not free. However, there is a scale of choice. Once again, it's inflow, outflow, inflow, outflow. So if you look on the other side, it says complete freedom and responsibility at the top. So someone who has complete freedom and complete responsibility is transcendent. That person doesn't need to do anything. And at the bottom is no freedom and no responsibility. So the person at the bottom of the scale has no choice possible. That's oblivion. So that might be like a catatonic person. He has no choice. He won't make a choice. So different people are at different levels of freedom and responsibility. And any one of these 7 levels will apply to somebody. Now, there is a general condition. For example, a person might chronically be at a level, but also this is a specific scale. So you can use this for multiple things. You can say, well, regarding my career, how am I doing on choice? So as opposed to dating, that's another area of choice. So you could use this for many different parts of your life and many parts of other people's lives to help them. So let's say you have somebody who's at level 4, which is any choice but one's own. That's the level of irresponsibility. That person cannot make a choice. If you ask them to make a choice, they won't. They can't do it. It's too upscale for them. So if you spot the person on this level, you can move them up to level 3 to one's own choice, and then he will be able to make a choice. So this is an extremely powerful scale, and it's also extremely applicable. So as you can see, also, it says one viewpoint, many viewpoints, one viewpoint, many viewpoints, one viewpoint, many viewpoints, one viewpoint. So this scale alternates between one viewpoint and many viewpoints. So for example, level 6 is the group's choice. That is collectivism, like as in communism. For example, when you were in the Soviet Union, they told you what job you were going to have, what school you were going to go to, what house you're going to live in. So it was collective. The group made the choice. Now, there are many viewpoints involved in this because it's a group that's deciding. Now, up from that is another's choice, which is robotism. A person who acts like a robot. There's only one viewpoint, and it's the viewpoint of whoever is telling them what to do. Up from that is any choice but one's own, which is their responsibility. And that's many viewpoints because That guy will listen to anybody. Anybody. What was the last thing you heard?
I think last time I remembered you said something about collectivism.
Oh, okay, collectivism. Okay, that's a long way down. Okay, so I was explaining how this is an alternation between one viewpoint and many viewpoints. See, a person who is in level 6, group's choice, which is collectivist, there are many viewpoints because there's a lot of people in the group. Up from that is another's choice. So this is being told by a specific person. It's one viewpoint, but it's not yours. Up from that is any choice but one's own, which is irresponsibility. And that's many viewpoints because you'll take anything. Anybody who makes a suggestion you'll take because you don't want to be responsible for it. Up from that is one's own choice, which is selfishness. That's one viewpoint and it's your viewpoint. Up from that is any choice. A person above selfishness has a kind of aloofness. He doesn't really care. He's above selfishness. And so there are many viewpoints there because whatever the people say, he'll go along with because he can have any choice at all. And then above that is no choice necessary. A transcendent person doesn't have to make a choice because he's transcendent. He doesn't care. There's one viewpoint and it's his, and it's a viewpoint of, I don't have to make a choice. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so this may also be called the scale of volition. And it answers the question, who decides? So notice that level 1 and level 7 are both no choice. In level 7, it's no choice possible. And at level 1, it's no choice necessary. So obviously no choice necessary is a very high view. It's a transcendent view. Whereas no choice possible, that's oblivion. Now, many of the scales have that type of overlap where level 1 and level 7 have an apparent similarity. And this is what I call a spiral scale. I don't have any trouble distinguishing between the highest level and the lowest level, but some people will make that mistake. Some people will look at the person who's transcendent and think he's oblivious. He's not. Because he's transcendent, he just doesn't care. You know, if you say, what do you want to do tonight? He says, I don't care. He's transcending this choice. Any question?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So, I'll go to the next one. Okay. Now, I need 2 books because I can't really see what you're seeing. Okay. The next is the scale of permeation. Now, I don't know how many people understand this concept, but let me try to explain it to you this way. The basic action of a spiritual being is permeation. When you see 2 people deeply in love, they are permeating one another. That is level 1, complete permeation. And that is a state of power. There's power in that. At the bottom of the scale is must permeate. That's compulsion. A person who is compulsive about something, he must permeate that area. Up from that is not must permeate, but unable to permeate. So unable to permeate is better than must permeate. That's succumbing. That's better than compulsion. Up from that is able to permeate. Now, able to permeate is not the same as permeating. It's just able. This person is indifferent. He's able to permeate, but he doesn't really care. Up from that is unwilling to permeate. That's antipathy. A person who's antipathetic to you is unwilling to permeate you. Up from that is willing to permeate, which is empathy. A person who has empathy is willing to permeate. Up from that is can permeate at will. That is success. When a person's successful, he can permeate at will. So we have somebody like Elvis Presley when he was the king of rock and roll. You know, he could permeate at will. And so he had fantastic success. And above that is complete permeation, which is a condition of power. you are in power over whatever it is that you're permeating completely. Now notice also you have the plus minus here. Because, again, like these previous scales, this is an alternation between inflow and outflow. So, must permeate is an outflow. You are compulsive, okay?
Yeah.
Whereas unable to permeate, you are succumbing. That's an inflow. Up from that is able to permeate, which is indifference, which is an outflow. It's a weak outflow, but it's an outflow. And up from that is willing to permeate, empathy. Unwilling to permeate, which is antipathy. That person is withdrawing into himself. He is not outflowing into. So this tells you a tremendous amount about what's going on with this person. A person who's high on the scale will enjoy at level 1 power, at level 2 success, at level 3 empathy. And you see it goes down eventually to compulsion. So again, this scale, once you realize that's inflow, outflow, or reach, withdraw, which is the same thing, you realize that that is why the scale comes together this way. One might think, well, must permeate is not as bad as unable to permeate, but it breaks up the inflow, outflow. And this is just the natural law. This is the way this thing functions. Now, not every scale has this plus minus function in it. 7 of the scales do. The other scales do not. But this is something that's extremely helpful. When you look at the person, you say, is this person inflowing or outflowing? So the person who's outflowing empathy toward you is willing to permeate you. See, that is a very positive thing. It's not as bad as can permeate at will, which is success. For example, if you look at the Beatles in the mid-60s, they were spectacularly successful, and they could permeate at will. You know, as soon as they came on stage, they were permeating everybody who was in the building. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so I just want to comment that permeation would be mysterious to, if not altogether denied by, most materialists, nihilists, and atheists. Permeation is a spiritual ability, and one's appreciation of spiritual phenomena is directly proportional to one's ability to permeate. All truly creative and productive persons have a high ability to permeate, if only in the relevant area. So again, the person might not be permeating his wife, but he may be permeating his work. So we have a guy who, let's say he's a passionate artist. You know, he loves to paint. He's driven to paint like Monet. In that area, he might be at level 2, or maybe even at level 1. But as far as his wife, he's a flop. Okay, he might be antipathetic toward her, which would be unwilling to permeate. So you can assess various functions in your life, various areas of your life by using this scale. And this explains an awful lot about why some people succeed and other people don't. Some people have an ability to permeate. For example, you can take some musicians. There are some musicians who don't sing particularly well, don't play particularly well, don't look great, but they're still very successful. And a lot of that has to do with permeation. And then you have people who sing and play extremely well, look great, but their permeation is low. So they don't come across. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we don't have any questions, I'll go on.
Well, actually, that's all the time we have for this episode. So,
okay.
Well, it was great having you here, Jim.
Thank you, Peter.
I really appreciate it.
Okay.
You're welcome. And until next time, stay tuned for more.